Hey everyone, I hope you're excited as I'm going to be building this cute little AI chatbot that will answer any questions you may have on any book, PDF, or large text you give it. Can't be bothered to read a book? Don't worry. This bot means you won't have to. Just ask the bot questions about the book instead. And how are we going to do this? It's actually not as hard as you think. We are going to write some Python code and use LangChain that will allow us to take a PDF, break up all the pieces of text into chunks, and then produce text embeddings for us that will help in matching the query we write here to the text in the book. For this, we will be storing the embeddings in our single store database, as well as using the OpenAI API in order to produce text embeddings of our query text that we will then match against our database. And we're going to be doing this all in a React app with a Node.js backend that has all the configuration already set up for us to easily communicate with our database. So a lot of cool things happening here: text embeddings, LangChain, OpenAI API, single store, and lots more. So let's do it. This tutorial is perfect for those wanting to try the hand at AI development. Okay, so SingleStore is the database system that we are going to be using. It does a bunch of really cool stuff, which is why we're going to be using it today, including allowing us to use kind of like a Google Notebooks in here too, in order to write our Python script. So please do sign up. It is free. And then if you actually go ahead and go through all of these checkpoints, you get a bunch of extra credits. So definitely do that and just collect all the credits. So you can see I've already signed up to SingleStore DB. I've already created a workspace before, and the tutorial I haven't completed, but don't worry. I'm going to be your tutorial guide for today. But if you want extra points, or if you just want to learn a little bit more about SingleStore, then definitely do that. And once you've collected some extra credits, let's carry on. Okay, so great. First off, the first thing I'm going to do on SingleStore, again, this is where we're going to be holding our database as well as writing our Python script, is actually connect an app to the database, which we are yet to create. Now, this command, it's kind of like create React app. Apart from its configuration, it's going to include everything you need in order to connect to the SingleStore database. So it's pretty cool. All I'm going to do is locate a folder that I want to work with. So I'm just going to get out my terminal and I'm going to navigate to WebStorm projects. So just like that. And then in here, I'm going to use the command npx create SingleStore db-app, so that's all one word, and then whatever you want to call your project. So in this occasion, I'm going to call it PDF-AI reader. So npx string, and then we're just going to follow that up with the API key that we're going to need in order to communicate with our database. So just go down here, we're going to scroll down to the organization. Yours will say something else, mine says Anya, and then under API keys right here, we're just going to select that and create a new API key. Now, of course, we can call this whatever you want, so please go ahead and do that. I'm just going to call it Code with Anya, and I'm going to say that it never expires. Okay, so that's the option I'm choosing, and I'm just going to create that, and then, of course, copy it and save it somewhere safe, as well as put it back into my terminal command. So let's just go back here. If we go back here, you will see that key is active, and then once we are happy with that, I'm just going to go back and paste in that API key. So that is the full command. Once you have that, go ahead and click enter. And that will essentially, like I said, spin up the project. So spin up our React project with all the configuration needed in order to communicate with this database right here. So under PDF AI Reader Workspace Group 2 is what it's generating it for me. It might be different for you. And once that is done, you should be able to essentially wait for the workspace to be active. So you'll see there's a little countdown here, and all that's doing is just waiting for our workspace, so our workspace here, to be active. In the UI itself, you will also see the progress here. So we just need to wait for that to essentially be finished. Okay? Great. So that is now done. Let's continue. So once again, here is my project and I have one workspace in here at the moment. It is active, so that is good. And under databases, you will just have a default called information schema. Just ignore this. We're going to be creating our own database pretty soon. So to do that, we're going to go back here. So just click on the actual project itself. And then under here, we're going to create a database. Now I'm going to choose to call this reader data, so reader underscore data, and this is essentially where we're going to store whatever the PDF reader reads, so all the text that it chooses to chunk up into little chunks, as well as the text embedding. So that is what we're going to do. Let's create that database. You will see it, so don't worry, I'm going to show you. If this is just going over your head now, don't worry, because I'm going to show you some visuals soon. And once we are here, now we're going to be adding data into here from the Python script, right? Because we need to get a PDF document and then essentially split it up into text chunks and text embeddings and then stick it into this database. So let's go ahead and do that. Under here, so under the develop tab, I'm going to now, under personal, create a new notebook. So under personal here, I'm just going to go ahead and click on this little plus icon. Let's start with a blank notebook. I'm just going to call this LangChain PDF and just click create. So this is where we're going to be writing our script. So let's do it. If you use Google Notebooks before, or I think it's called Colab, Google Colab now, then this will be very familiar as it's essentially the same thing. So before we get doing anything, we're just going to have to make sure that our connection is to the correct workspace. So just make sure that it's the one we just created. In my case, it's PDF AI Reader Workspace 1. And the database that we need to connect is Reader Data. So again, the one we just created. Wonderful. Now, I'm just going to write the titles here so it's really obvious what we're doing. First off, we're just going to install the library. So I'm just going to paste it in here like so because I have this already pre-done. And let's just save this as markdown as it's not code. I just want to be able to read this, right? This is just for readability, nothing else. Now we're going to write down all the libraries that we need to install. Once again, I have pre-done this. So here are the libraries that we're going to install. This is code, so on the drop down, make sure that is done as code. We're going to install LangChain, OpenAI as well, as we're going to be using the OpenAI package. PDF to image is another one, and tick token and unstructured are two others as well. So go ahead and run this code in order to install those packages or libraries. Great. Next up, we are going to load the PDF from an online location. So this needs to be online. So whatever PDF you're working with, please make sure it's online. I'm going to be using one that I can share with you. This is the code in order to load the PDF from an online location. We're going to be using the LangChain library and we're going to import something called online PDF loader. Okay, so that's what we're going to do. We're going to get the online PDF loader method. We're going to pass through the URL to where the PDF lives online. I'm going to save that under loader in order to essentially get the data from that PDF. Now, we are going to have to add a firewall exception, otherwise we might be, blocked from actually reading this PDF. So I'm going to show you how to do that. First off, however, I'm just going to paste in the URL. So this is the URL to this PDF. Okay, it is a guide to data science. So this is going to be a book about data science that we're going to be querying thanks to our chatbot. Now, this lives on this domain, so we're going to have to copy that, right? See, it's the same. And then I'm just going to edit firewall and simply just add it here. So I'm just going to paste that in like so, removing the HTTPS part, and then I'm just going to save that. Okay, so there we go. Let's just check that worked. And it does, it's there. Great. Now, don't forget to run that code. So we're going to have to run it, and wonderful, that is done. So we've essentially got that PDF and got all the data from it. Now let's check how many documents and characters are in the book. So again, this is the code for this. Make sure to save that line as markdown on this as code. Again, from the LangChain package, we're going to import something called recursive character text splitter. So that's a method. And then we're just going to print out how many documents are in our data and then print out how many characters are in our data by looking at the data, getting its length, and then secondly, for the characters, getting the data, looking at the first item in that data and getting its page content and then getting that length. So let's do it. All I'm going to do is just once again run that code, and we have one document in our data, and there are essentially, what even is that, 199,527 characters in our document. So that is kind of cool. We can already see that's work. We can see how many characters in the document and so on. Great. Now let's split that data, so the data we just uploaded, into chunks before we turn them into embeddings. So this will nicely chunk up our data, and the code for this, so once again, save that text as markdown and save this as code. We're going to use the recursive character text splitter method. We're going to define our chunk size as 2000, and then we're going to save this as the text splitter itself, so just a variable. Next, we're going to use that text splitter and a method called split document and pass through data into there and then save that as texts. So then now if we print out the length of text, it will tell us how many documents we have now. So let's run this, and we have 139 pages. We split the text. We've got 139 pages now to work with. Great. Now let's convert the chunks into embeddings and store them into the single store table. So essentially under reader data. So to do this, let's split this up. So I'm just going to get Markdown again, and let's create the table first. And the code for this is, well, I'm going to type this out as this is SQL. We're going to use the command use reader data. So we're using the table that we called reader data. And next, I'm going to just do drop table if exists my book, as that's what we're going to call the table in the reader data database. And then we're going to just create it. So create table if not exists my book. Now we're going to define what goes into that table. We're going to have an ID, and that's going to be an integer value, also a primary key. So that's how we're going to find this item in our table. And then we're going to have some text. This is, of course, text characters. And then we're also going to have the embedding, which is going to be a blob. So we're literally just going to have text embedding, and an ID to find that row, essentially. So let's execute this code, and great. Now to check this works, let's just go into our reader data database, and ta-da, we have made our table. It's here. It's called My Book. So that has worked. Amazing. Let's go back to our code. So the next thing I'm going to do is actually start working with OpenAI. So in order to do this, I'm going to just paste in this code. We're going to import the package OpenAI, and then I'm going to use that OpenAI package in order to communicate with OpenAI. So we're going to first have to put in our OpenAI key. So hopefully you've already signed up to OpenAI. Here is what it should look like. Here's my key. I will be disabling this later. So if you want to get yours, just head over to OpenAI, sign in, and then click on the API part of the walkthrough. And then here, all you're going to do is find your API key. So just under your name here, just go view API keys and then create a new secret key. So I'm going to call this tutorial and click create a secret key, copy that, and then just paste it in like so. Okay, of course, like I'm just going to use my old one, but that's how you would get your OpenAI API key and just put it in here. Great. So now let's run this. So that is now done. I should now essentially be kind of connected to OpenAI so I can use all of its wonderfulness. Now let's just print out the first text chunk from our table just to see that it has worked. Okay, so that's what I'm doing here and running the code, and it has. Now let's actually connect to our database so we can put stuff into the table, as we don't want to just get stuff from the table. Great. So now we're going to use OpenAI to create embeddings for the text we have in our database. And we're going to do so by using LangChain again and then importing OpenAI embeddings. So first off, let's initialize OpenAI embeddings. And to do that, we need to pass through the OpenAI API key again in order to start our embedder and run the code. Now let's actually add those embeddings to the My Book table. So again, the table we have created with the text in it, we're just going to whack in those embeddings too. So the code to do this is this. So first off, we clear the My Book table, and next we iterate over the texts. So all the text in our database, right, we're going to have to iterate over it and create an embedding for it. And this is the code to do so. And then we're going to write that command in order to insert into My Book and insert that embedding. And to do that, to insert that embedding, we're going to use JSON array pack. Okay, so that is what we're going to do to put that embedding into the table once we have that embedding. So great, that is the code to do so. We are iterating over the whole table. We are connecting to the database, and then we're just going to wait for that to do its thing. And great. So now we have a table of texts and embeddings. So if we look in the databases, okay, we look in the reader data, click into My Book, you will see we have a column for the ID, a column for the text, and a column for the embeddings. This is looking wonderful. And we even get some sample data too. So this is like sample data of what our table would look like. We've got the text, we've got the embeddings created by OpenAI. Great. Okay, wonderful. Now, what is text embedding? Well, there is no 3-sentence answer for this. In fact, explaining this would require a whole dedicated video. But for the purposes of this tutorial, just know that is a representation of a word that is a set of characters that can be used to find similar words. And by that, I don't mean that if you have the word food, that then a similar word to it would be foot, which lexicographically is similar. I am talking about the actual meaning of the word. So for example, with text embeddings, you can return the word burger back instead. If you're interested in what this looks like, this is what the text embedding for food looks like. This is what it looks like for the word foot. And this is what it looks like for the word burger. Now, we have just used a Python package to produce embeddings that represent text, as you can see here in the table. OpenAI can actually also give you the text embeddings for a word or sentence. We are also going to be using its API in our JavaScript project so that we can convert sentences to text embeddings that we can then use to compare to this table to find similar text. If you are interested in a deeper learning of text embeddings, check out my video on the subject. Okay, so back to here. Let's just check this has worked. So I'm just going to paste in some code that's going to essentially look in my table called My Book. We're going to use the database reader data, and then we're going to look in the table for the row with ID 5 and just run it. Okay, so just run this and ta-da, we get the embedding. There is our whole embedding, and then we get the text that essentially generated that embedding so that we can work with it in order to perform sentiment analysis on our database. So cool, we've created our table. Hope you've learned a lot about text embeddings and how to create them using the OpenAI API, as well as a little bit about how to use LangChain and the stuff that you can do with it. Now it's time to go back to building our app and using this in order to build our chatbot that will essentially query based on these text embeddings. So let's do it. So what we're going to do is just open up our code editors, and now we're going to find that project. So I'm going to click open, and then under PDF AI reader, I'm just going to open that up. So I'm going to trust this project, and there we go. Great. So here we go. I'm just going to delete a few things that we don't need in order to get started. But essentially what has happened here is that it has added the host variable, the password to our database that we fed into it. And I'm quickly just going to paste in the OpenAI API that we used earlier. Okay, so that has been generated for me. And then what has also been generated, of course, is all the packages that we need in order to start this project. So npm run dev is what we're going to use in order to start the back end and the front end of this project. And if we look in here, we see the server, which has the connections, the routes, and the server itself. So the routes, we're not going to need all of these routes as we aren't going to be doing the setup here. We've done the setup in the UI. In fact, a bunch of this stuff we will not be needing. So for example, we're not going to be getting the database. We're not going to be getting this table. And then also the connections. We're not going to be using a bunch of these because we're simply going to be getting data from our database. We're not going to be making any post or put requests. So let's do it. So first off, on the server TS file, we're going to actually keep this as it is. This is looking good. On the routes next, let's scroll all the way up. The only thing that we're going to need from here is get databases and then also select table. So let's just get rid of all of these. We're not going to be using this one either. So there we go. We're going to keep all of these as they are. We are also going to have to import. So let's just make this bigger for you. I'm going to import configuration as well as OpenAI API from OpenAI. So this is a package we're going to have to install. So let's get up our terminal and I'm just going to do npm I OpenAI to install that package that will help us work with OpenAI. So let that do its thing and let's carry on. The next thing we're going to also need is the .env config in order for us to use the .env file and store variables in there. So that is another thing that we are going to have to import. So that's already been done here. Let's grab that package and get the config from it. So once again, let's just check that that .env package has been installed. Okay, so that's already in there. Great. Next, let's carry on. So we can keep this sure, like if you want to check that everything's working, we can keep that there. The other thing we're going to have to do is actually keep these set up, as that is the thing that essentially saves the host and password to my .env file. So let's move down. Let's get rid of that console log there. We're not going to be creating any databases, so I'm actually going to delete all of this stuff that inserts a table, creates a table, and so on. So there we go. So let's carry on. Now, are we going to get the databases? I'm just going to delete this console log right here. Well, we can have this to get the databases if we want, so that we can keep. We're not going to want to post new databases, so let's delete that. I'm also going to delete the thing that allows us to delete databases. I'm also going to delete this to get the table and this route to post a new table, as well as one to post this as well. So at the moment, this is what our file should look like. Okay, we've got a route to just say single store to check it's working. We've got a route to set up our .env file and populate it with the hostname and the password. And then we also have this route to just, I guess, show the database. So we can keep that, or you don't have to have it. It's just up to you. Next, I'm going to go into connections and clean this up next. So let's go ahead and delete anything that we don't need to export. So at the moment, we are just importing get databases and select table, which means we can delete anything else from here. So once again, I'm just going to zoom in a little bit. Just scroll down. I'm going to keep that function as it's used in this file. We're going to keep get databases as we definitely want to get the databases. We have kept that in. Create database, we can delete. So I'm just going to delete all of that. Let's also delete this delete databases, as well as create a table that can go. And we're going to keep select table, as we said. Let's also delete insert table. And there we go. So that should be our file. At the moment, it should have this connect single store function, this stop single store function, the get databases function, and the select table function that we export and use in Roots. Okay, wonderful. So I believe that is our server now cleaned up. Let's move on to the client next. So in the client, I'm actually just going to delete all of this really. So let's delete all these components. I'm going to delete. Okay, delete anyway. Under pages, I'm going to delete the pages as we don't have any pages. It's just going to be a simple app. The CSS file I'm going to keep. And in fact, maybe let's just move it out. I'm going to make this super simple. So just move it out onto the same level as the client. So refactor. And that just means we can delete these folders. So delete. And also delete the utils too. So really making this super streamlined. So we should just have 3 files in here. The app CSS should be empty at the moment. The app TS file, well, we're going to do a lot of stuff from here. So I'm going to delete all these imports. I'm just going to zoom in so you can see this a little bit better. Delete that. I'm going to delete this constant of themes. And for now, we're just going to return a simple div. So let's delete that. And there we go. Great. Now you can rewrite this if you want. So I prefer to write function expressions. It's completely up to you how you want to do this. It just means you need to export default app down here later on. And of course, you can have the semicolons or not have the semicolons. I will be cleaning up this code before uploading it onto my GitHub. So you'll have the final stuff here. Let's just get on with coding. Great. And this can just say app for now. Now the index.ts file, I'm just going to change this up a bit too. I'm just going to import app SCSS so that now all the styling will be imported in here and applied. And I'm just going to wrap this in React strict mode as well. So let's just open that up and I'm going to wrap it. I'm going to get React.strict mode. Okay, and then get the closing tag and just wrap it in like so. So there we go. Once again, this is what my whole index.ts file should look like. This is what my app.tsx file should look like. And this is what my app SCSS file should look like. Great. Now let's run this. So all I'm going to do is open up my terminal and do npm run dev like we saw in the package.json file. And that should open up my app on localhost 3000. So if I now get up my browser and visit localhost 3000, you will see just the word app, and I'm going to inspect it because this is currently my app. Okay, there's not much in here apart from the word app, as you will see here, right? That's what I'm returning. So great, we've now cleaned up everything. I've got rid of everything that we really don't need. I'm just going to shut all this down and let's carry on. The first thing I'm going to do is just actually create the chatbot. Now this won't be complicated, okay? So let's just get up our app.tsx file. I'm just going to make the most simple one that you've ever seen. So let's minimize this. I'm just going to zoom in. This is going to be a div. And I'm going to give this the class name of chatbot, just like so. And in here, I'm going to create another div. This div, I'm going to give the class name of header to. So this is going to be the header of my chatbot, which is going to have another div. And this is going to be for the information. So let's give this the class name of info container. with just an H3 that says chat with, and then we're going to put the main title, so we'll make it H2, and I'm going to just call this book bot, and I'm literally just going to put in a text symbol that I found off the internet. So if you want the same one, just visit this URL, so compart.com, and this in order to get that. Okay, great. Let's move on. So that's what we have done. And next, after this info container, but still in the header, I'm just going to put in an SVG. Okay, it's one that I have generated. So all you would do is go to SVG generator wave. And I've just created a wave, so you could do the same. So you can select here the colors and everything like that. And then it will generate one for you right here. So that's what I have done. Essentially, you can pick the direction too. Of course, you can make it more or less. And once you are done with that, you can take the code. So that's all you can do. Copy right here and then paste it in. So I already have one that I pre-made, so I'm just going to paste it in. Again, you can take mine or you can make yours, but essentially it will give you a wave. So at the moment, this won't look like much. My app will just look like this because I haven't actually put it in a box or put any widths or anything like that, but you get the idea. Great. So let's just take that off. Let's carry on. So now what I'm going to do, after we've put in everything into the header, so the header finishes there, I'm going to create another div. And this div is going to be for the feed. So I'm just going to give this the class name of feed, like so. And in here, I'm going to essentially map out two things because each bubble is going to essentially show the question and then the response. So I'm going to map that onto two divs. So these two divs, well, the first one, let's give this the class name of question, just like that. And then I'm also going to give it another class of bubble. Okay, so this is going to also have the class name of bubble, but also another class name. This is going to be the response. So we've got the question and the response. Great. And then finally, after the feed, so the feed finishes there, I'm just going to have a text area. Okay, so that's all I'm going to do. This is a self-closing tag. And of course, we're going to have to pass through a value and an on change. And actually, one more thing, I'm going to have a button. So this button, again, I'm just going to put in a text symbol. So this is the one, it's an arrow and it looks like this. And if you want to get it, follow this URL right here and just copy that. Great. So this button, again, is going to have an on click to get the response. But first off, let's style this up a bit, right? Let's do it. So let's get up the styling file. And in here, I'm just quickly going to add it because it really isn't that much. We're going to first off get the body and remove any margin and padding. Next, I'm just going to add a background color to it. So the background color is going to be RGB 227227227, so kind of like off-white. And then I'm going to use display flex in order to essentially initialize flexbox, and then I'm going to justify content end because I want it to be at the very end, so at the right hand side, and then I'm going to do align items end as well, so it's at the bottom. Okay, which means we also need to assign this as a height, otherwise align items will not work. And I'm also going to say that the font family for my body is going to be Arial and sans serif. Okay, so at the moment it looks like this. Everything is kind of squishing here, no matter how big the browser is. That is looking good. Now let's actually style the chatbot. So let's grab this class name. So I'm going to use dot for class name and the chatbot. Well, I'm going to give it a position of relative as we're going to have to position stuff inside of this, inside the chatbot. So these children elements are going to have other positions, which is why this needs to have a position relative. So it positions to this chatbot. Next, I'm also going to hard code the height and make sure that is 500 pixels, as well as the width. So I'm going to give the width 400 pixels. I'm also going to say overflow hidden. Now the background color, I'm just going to make this white. So that's RGB 255, 255, 255. Okay, so it's going to be a white box. I'm going to also round off the edges with some border radius. In fact, I'm just going to do 20 pixels, and then 0, 0, so that it's not rounded off on the bottom too. And now let's space it out. Again, I'm going to do 20 pixels on the top, 20 pixels on the right, 0 on the bottom, and 20 pixels on the left. And finally, I'm going to add a box shadow. So the box shadow I'm going to add, the first layer is going to be transparent. It's going to essentially be black with 0.16, I guess, opacity, and 0 x-axis, 10 pixels y-axis, 36 pixels blur, and 0 spread. And I'm going to overlay it with another one. So I'm going to, once again, let's just do RGBA, and I'm going to do black, and then I'm going to do 0.06. Okay, 0 x-axis, 0 y-axis, 0 blur, and this time I'm going to do 1 pixel spread. Cool. So again, at the moment, it will look like this. Just a final few things to do that we need to do. In fact, I'm also going to say that any H2 and any H3 elements are just going to have a margin of 5 pixels. I'm going to overwrite the margin of that text. I'm also going to grab the info container. So let's grab the element by the info container. Let's hard code a height for this. I'm going to say 60 pixels. And I'm also going to essentially give it a background color. So just a background actually. So I'm going to use linear gradient. And I'm going to start off with RGB 651,118, and it's going to go to RGB 131,75. Okay, and cool. So that is my linear gradient. I'm also going to give it some padding so that everything's not so squished to the sides, and make sure that the font in here is white by passing through RGB 244, 244, 244. Okay, so that is now my info container. You will see I've added the linear gradient to kind of fill up the rest of that space. And it kind of looks like it's one with the SVG, but the SVG is actually here, and that is the box with the gradient. Cool, let's continue. So we've got the info container. Next, I'm also going to grab the text area. So let's grab that whole element, not a class name, so we don't need a dot. And I'm just going to actually use position absolute. Make sure that it's at the bottom. So I'm going to position it bottom 0, but also left 0. Let's get rid of the border. So border none. I'm also going to make sure that the width is 100% of the parent. Let's do box sizing, border box, so that it's inside, right? So at the moment it will kind of disappear, but it will be there, right? We got rid of the border. So there it is. And it's fitting inside thanks to this piece of code right here rather than outside of the parent. Next, I'm just going to give it a border top, 1 pixel solid, and I'm going to choose this kind of gray color. Okay, and finally, I'm going to do padding, 25 pixels on the top, 70 pixels on the right, 25 pixels at the bottom, and 25 pixels on the left. 70, I've padded out 70 as I essentially only want the text inside of here to kind of finish there. So then when we put the button here, the text won't go behind the button. So that's what I've done. I'm also going to get rid of that blue outline by grabbing text area and getting the focus and just doing outline none. Okay, so that blue line will now go if we interact with it. Next, I'm also going to grab let's grab the header. So let's grab the element with the class name of header, and all I'm going to do is use position relative and give it a Z index of 1. So it's always at the front, right? So when the feed comes in, we want this to be at the front and the feed will scroll up and down, which means we also need to grab the feed. So the element of the class name of feed, I'm going to give this a position of absolute. I'm going to actually position it from the bottom 82 pixels, so it's over the text area. Make sure from the left it's 0. Let's make sure that the width is also 100%. The height of this is going to be 250 pixels. And now we also want to scroll inside of it, which is why I want to scroll from the top to bottom, and I've given overflow Y scroll. So at the moment, it's kind of hard to tell. Let's refresh. So that blue line is now gone, and we should be able to scroll in here once we have elements in here. Let's style the button next. So the button, well, first off, actually, let's grab the button. I'm going to give it a height of 40 pixels, so let's make it a circle. Next, I'm also going to give it a width of 40 pixels, and then a border radius, making sure to spell border radius correctly, of 50%, right? And now let's change the color. So background color, I'm just going to go with the bluish kind of dark color that I have picked out, and the font of this is going to be gray, so let's use 207 again. And the position is going to be absolute. So that means we can now position it from the bottom 21 pixels and also from the right 21 pixels, so that now if we refresh, it will show up there. How cool is that? Next, let's style the bubbles. So all I'm going to do is just style the bubble. So let's grab the element with the class of bubble, and I'm just going to hard code the width of this to be 250 pixels, give it padding of 20 pixels. Let's also give it a margin. Oops, that has to be in here. So the margin of this is going to be 10 from the top and bottom and 25 pixels from the left and right. Let's round off the edges. So I'm going to go border radius. Let's make it 10 pixels. And now let's also give it a box shadow. So box shadow, RGBA, and I'm going to do it black again with 0.24 opacity. 0 x-axis 3 pixels, y-axis 8 pixels blur, and then the color of the text in here is going to be RGB 747474. So that's my bubble. At the moment there's 2, and to differentiate one from the other, I'm going to grab the I guess the question. So let's grab that. So dot question, if something has the class of dot question, I just want to change the background color slightly. I want to change to 244, 248, 255. Okay, so that it looks kind of like blue. And then the response, I'm going to just change the margin. So let's grab this. And the response, I'm going to add margin left 85 pixels like so. And we are done. Let's continue. Next up, what we're going to do is actually get rid of everything in the front end so that we can open this up again and have a look. So here's our client, here's our server. What I want to do is just pass over whatever we type in here. Let's call this the text query to the back end first. So let's work on that. So here, well, I'm just going to minimize this. On the app, we're going to have to import a few more things, and that is use state so that we can essentially save stuff in here. So let's define what we're going to save up here. Well, we're going to let's get text, and I'm going to use set text. I'm going to get React and then get the method of use state from it and start off with this being null at the beginning. And because this is TypeScript, let's define that we want this to be a string, so we can only save strings in here. Great. So now what we're going to do is actually on change of the text area. So here on change of this, going to get the event and pass the e-target value, so whatever value we have in the text area, and I'm going to pass that through the method of set text so that we can change this value of text, which is currently this string, right? Because by passing through an empty string, we are assigning that to this value, and the only way we can change this value is with set text. So that's what we're doing. So let's also display this in here by essentially getting this value and putting it as the value of the text area. So that is now done. It just means that whatever we type in here, I am some text, will get saved to text here. Great. And of course, we also need to send that over to our backend. So I'm going to write a route for this. So in routes, let's write a new route. So just down here, I'm just going to minimize that. So I'm going to do router, and this is going to be a get, because we want to pass through that text query in order to get a response back from the database for us. So let's do it. So the route we're going to do, I'm just going to stick to the same kind of structure. So let's do /API, then /database, and then we're going to get the parameter that we're going to pass through with the URL from the front end. So that's all we're going to do. This is going to be an async method. So yes, we need the request and the response. And for now, I'm just going to console log the params text, because we're just getting this right from the URL. So let's see if this has worked. So here, I'm going to write a function. It's going to be const get response. It's going to be an async function. So just like that, we're going to await fetch, and now we can essentially, I'm going to use backticks as we're going to pass through that text into this URL. It's going to be localhost 3000 API database, right? So this looks familiar. It's what we wrote in the back end. We're going to pass through the text. So whatever we pass through here, right, which is essentially whatever we are typing in here, because we are typing in here is being saved here, and then we're going to pass it through into this URL, which then we're going to pick out from here using request params text. Okay, cool. So that's what we are doing. Hopefully that makes sense. If not, I've got a great tutorial on this stuff with codewithanya.com if this is a bit over your head. So that's what we're fetching. We're essentially going to wait for that and save the response under the const response, right? So that's what we're going to do. And that's where we have that. We're going to get its JSON and call it, this is an async method, so you need to use the await keyword. And then let's just save this as data. So const data equals. Great. I'm also going to just whack this in a try and catch. So try and then catch any errors. So catch error, console error, error. Just take that and paste it in here. Great. So that's what we're going to do. And we're actually going to call this function when we click on the button. So on click of this, I'm just going to get response. So maybe let's console log data for now, just so we can see what is going on. I'm gonna just put response here, and let's continue. So this just means, let's just check this is working. I am some text. I'm just gonna refresh this as we made some changes. Sausages, and click on the button. And now if we look in our terminal, sausages gets passed through. This is because on routes, I've console logged that word, the request params text, sausages, this is our backend, right, is being passed through. That string is being passed through. Amazing. So we're getting the query from our front end to the back end so that we can now work with it. Now I'm just going to essentially, let's minimize this, save this as something. Let's save it as the const text so that we can work with it. So here is our text. I'm actually going to pass this through to OpenAI so we can essentially create a embedding from this. And for that, well, let's just go over to OpenAI, openai.com. And let's look at the API references. I'm just going to show you exactly what I am going to just take. So we're going to go to embeddings, and here is the Node.js example. So we can just copy all of that, and then we can paste it in like so. So we are getting the configuration. That is good. We are passing through the API key. So this is my OpenAI API key. So we're going process env OpenAI API, as that is what we called ours. Next, we're passing through that configuration. We don't actually need this as I've saved it to the top of the file. So we're just going to essentially use that configuration here. And then this, I'm going to put in a try and catch. So let's make a try and a catch. So we're going to catch any errors. And we're going to console error the error. So let's place all of this in the try. Okay, and instead of passing through this hard-coded string, we're going to pass through the text that we passed from our parameter. So great. That is what I want to do. And then I'm going to get the response. And I'm going to go into the data from it and get the data and get the first item and get the embedding. This is because our response will look like this. So we're going to go into this object, get the data from it, and get the embedding, which is going to be an array that looks like this, right? So that is my embedding. That array is essentially what I am getting here. And let's save it as embedding. Why not? Great. So once we have the embedding, I'm actually going to pass it through into a function. So that function I'm actually going to define in connections, and it's similar to these, right? So I'm just going to write my own function that I'm going to export. Let's actually just zoom in a bit. I'm going to export async function read data. And then we're going to pass through the connection. The database, not the table though. We're going to pass through the embedding into this function. And because it's TypeScript, I'm just going to have to do a bunch of TypeScript stuff. So let's define these three things. So I'm going to grab all three. The connection, I guess if it exists, is going to be the MySQL connection, which we've actually already predefined here. So I'm just copying it from here. Database is going to be a string, and embedding, I'm just going to put any here, even though actually this is an array, right? And it's an array of numbers. So let's maybe do that. Yep, I'm going to put number, and it's an array of numbers. Great. So that's what I have done. And now I'm going to also use try and catch. I'm going to catch error, console error, error, and return the error if one exists. So again, I'll be cleaning all of this up later, so don't worry. Now, what we're going to try do, I'm just going to, again, copy a bunch of stuff from here. So I'm going to copy this and paste it in to deal with if the connection is closed or not. And then I'm going to write, that's right, an SQL query in order for us to essentially look into our database and find a embedding that is similar to the one that we get back from OpenAI. So I'm going to do const rows. We're going to do await. I'm going to grab the connection. I'm going to execute. And we're going to execute a SQL query. So this SQL query is going to be, I'm going to use backticks as we're going to put stuff in here. I'm going to select text. I'm going to use dot product. And we're going to pass through embedding JSON. array pack, and then we're going to pass through the embedding in here. Okay, so that's where it's going to go. I'm going to come back to that as similarity from my book, because that's what I call the table, right? And then we're going to order by similarity, descending limit 1. So that is the full thing for you. Okay, select text, dot product. I'm going to pass through embedding, JSON array pack. I'm going to pass through the actual embedding here as similarity from my book, order by similarity, descending limit. Great. And what we're going to pass through here is, of course, the embedding that we pass through into the read data function. So let's grab it. It's an array of numbers. I'm going to make it a string though. I'm going to just open up that array to make sure it's an array. And then I'm going to pass through the embedding just like so. Okay. So once again, this is it. Don't forget to close this off. Okay, once again, you can get the final code from me if you are not sure, but I'm just going to go through this very slowly so you can copy and make sure it's okay. Great. Okay, so that is good. And then we're just going to return the rows, but just get the first item from it. Let's just console log this out again, just so we know this is working, right? So I'm going to console log, and then I'm just going to console log out this like so. And let's also deal with if there is a closed connection, then we want to stop single store. Okay, we're stopping that connection. Great. So now we have this function. I am exporting that function, and now I can import it here. Okay, so I'm going to import read data, and now I'm going to pass through that embedding into the read data function. So essentially what I am saying, why is this not liking that number? Okay, it's more complicated. I'm just going to put any for now, and we can come back to this. So where is embedding? Let's put any so that we can just work with it for now. So once again, we're getting some text. We're passing through that text into OpenAI to turn it into an embedding, which is essentially an array of numbers. We're saving it under embedding, and when we are then passing it through into the read data function. However, we also need to pass it through with the database, right? Because that was another parameter. So there we go. This is actually an async function, as we saw here. So we're going to have to await it. So we're going to do await. We also need to define the database. So let's go ahead and do that. I'm going to perhaps do it. Let's do it up here. So const database equals, and it's reader data, because that's what we called our database. And then also the table we can define here. The table we have is my book. Okay, so those are two constants that we have defined. Great. In fact, we don't really need select table, so let's get rid of that. We are not using it for this project. Cool. So now once we await the read data function, let's save the response of this as something. I'm going to save it as SQL response, right? Because that's what we're waiting for. We're waiting for this SQL query to come back with something. Ideally, the text that looks most like our embedding, right? So let's see if that works. For now, I'm just going to console log SQL res, and then maybe let's put that in strings just so we can see what's going on in the backend. Great. So I'm just going to get up my terminal, and then let's go back here. Let's send through sausages once more. So now you will see, ta-da! Okay, so now I'm just going to walk you through this once more. Sausages, was sent over with the parameter. We've got that parameter. We've saved sausages as text. We've then initiated OpenAI and sent over the word sausages to OpenAI to essentially create an embedding for us from that text. So now we've got the embedding for the word sausages, and we're passing that through into the reads data function along with the database, which we defined here, which is reader data, right? And we're passing it through into here. We've passed through the database, we've passed through the embedding, and we're essentially looking in the whole database for anything that matches the word sausages as an embedding. And if there is something, it returns it, okay? It returns it right here. The text has come back as putting it all together. So that was the closest thing that came back to sausages from our text. And that's what we are console logging out here. It's also what we're returning, which means that back here, that's what we have saved under SQL res here. Let's try another word though, maybe not sausages. Let's try data science, right? As our PDF is all about data science. And if we look in here, ta-da, this is the closest text we have to data science. There's a few, and there's also a higher similarity for this. Wonderful. So now that we have that, let's actually pass this back to OpenAI to create a kind of more readable text that the chatbot will come back with, right? Because this won't really tell us much if we write data science and it comes back with science touches every aspect. It doesn't really explain why it's returning this. So that's what I'm going to do. I'm just going to make it more kind of reader friendly. So now we don't have to console log this out anymore. I'm just going to create a prompt that we're going to pass through into the OpenAI IP again. It's going to say the user asked, and then we're just going to pass through the text that we have from the parameter. So the user asked this, the most similar text from the book is, and then we're going to essentially pass through the SQL res, right? So we're going to pass through the most similar text. Don't forget to put SQL res and then get the text from it, and it should come back essentially with a more chat-based response to this. However, let's go ahead and get the chat completions. However, we want to do it for chat. So let's go here. And once again, I'm just going to get that, copy it, paste it in like so. So now I'm just going to look at the messages, and the content is what I'm going to replace. I'm going to get rid of that string, and I'm just going to pass through that prompt. Okay, so wonderful. You can replace this model if you want to a newer one, or you can use 3.5. It's up to you. And then it's console logging out completion data choices 0 message. Well, that is what we want. However, I'm also going to use res JSON in order to send it back to us so we can use it in the front end. So that's all I'm going to do here. And now, so again, if we visit this URL, in fact, I can just pass it through. So here's my app like so, and then replace the text here to data, if data, something like data if we want. However, I'm not going to do it this way. It's just kind of showing you that you can do it that way too. Let's do it properly. So now that we are getting that back, let's go back to the app. And let's continue writing this, right? So we're visiting this URL, we're saving what comes back to us. That should now be the final piece of text. So after it's gone through the read data function, gone, looked in the database, and then been sent back again to OpenAI to make it more readable, that is what we're getting back. And let's save it to this state. So I'm going to save it as messages. So const messages, set message. This is going to be plural, so just add that S. This is not going to be a string. It's actually going to be an array. So let's make an empty array here. And we are going to essentially set messages with an object. And my object, so let's just do it here. I'm going to use set messages. Let's get all the previous messages, as this is how you essentially update arrays in React. And then I'm going to add a new object into here. And my object is going to look like this. It's going to have the question. So the original question we asked, right? So the original text that we saved. And then we're going to have the response, which is going to be the data content. Okay? So that's what I'm going to essentially do. And of course, we need to pour that out into an array. So there we go. We're pouring out all the existing messages, and then we're adding this new object, which is essentially going to take the text that I write in here, as well as the response we get back from the data. And that object has content, which we're going to save. So that's all we're doing. And this is shouting at me. This is because let's actually define this interface. So I'm going to do so up here. Interface message. And this is just essentially a data type, right? And it's going to have question, which is going to be a string. And then also the response, which is a string. So now we can use this interface to say that messages take an array. Sure, it's an array of objects that look like this. So that's what this piece of text is doing in TypeScript. So great, let's check it out. So I'm just going to console log out the response for now, which is where you will see why I did .content. And let's do it. And once I have messages, once that exists, so once an array of objects that look like this exists, I'm going to map it onto here, right? Onto these two divs. So here's my wrapping div. I'm going to grab that and put that in here. And if messages exist, I'm going to map them onto essentially this, right? Great. So if for each message that exists in that array, I'm going to map it onto here. And then I'm going to get that message question, and here I'm going to show the message response, right? The question and the response. So cool. We should probably, as we are mapping, we should probably have an index, right, too, so that we can assign it to the key. So maybe to here, key equals index, just like so. This means this probably can't be empty, so let's just make it a div. There we go. And once again, I will be kind of clean this up, so don't you worry. And great. So now let's check this out. Let's go back here. It's going to refresh this. What does the book say about data science? Question mark, send. And there we go. And we can ask other ones too. So for example, let's go with what does it say about hyperfast analytics? And that should be appended to the end here, just added to the messages that we have in here. Okay, cool. And that's it. I hope you've enjoyed coding along with me. I will be tidying all this up, meaning that I will be getting rid of unnecessary console logs and just, you know, making this a little bit neater. So please do check out the code below. I'm going to be leaving it there for you. And if you have any questions, then do let me know as well. Thanks so much again for coding, and I'll see you again soon.